Oh, hi there. We're glad you're watching one of our virtual lunch presentations. We have a lot of good information that we've been accumulating over the past several years, and we invite you to look down just below here and hit the subscribe button, and the little bell will give you a reminder of when our next presentation is published here on the YouTube channel. Thanks for your support. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. We're really happy this week to have Mike Friedman and Chris Crump. We're going to have a very interesting discussion on getting audio to the transmitter site. We can go in many different ways, but particularly these gentlemen are going to focus on the BRIClinks and how we can get more out of those. And we'll have time to talk about other options as well. So, Mike, I guess we want to start with you and Chris and get started.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You want to say, hey, Chris?
Hey, everybody. I'm just here to back up Mike. So as questions come up, just ping me and I'll turn my mic back on. Otherwise, I'll just keep my mouth shut.
No, trust me, he's got the harder job today because he's going to have to explain how all of this magic works. So let me back up, introduce myself. I'm Mike Friedman. I've been to quite a few of these meetups on Thursdays when I can. I am an engineer at VPM, Virginia's Public Media in Richmond, Virginia. And I've been doing this for a little over 30 years. And I've been a huge fan of Comrex devices ever since I became aware of them in the beginning of my career. And today's presentation was spawned from a necessity I had with my company. And that is simply that everyone else can stream audio to their transmitter sites in rural areas in many cases. Why can't we? And populated areas. And boy, I took the job 6 years ago. They've been asking from that point forward, and we just didn't have the reliable internet connectivity. And so finally, fast forward, and I do want to share this one fact. One of the rural areas in Northumberland County in the northern neck of Virginia, there was only one internet source we had in that area without going with a mobile service. And there was another service in the area, and we wanted something reliable, and that would be reliable. But I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars to make this happen. So we got lucky. The local sheriff has allowed us to use his tower to beam a signal just 1 mile down the road. And that is what made today's presentation possible. And there was an accident along the way. So we figure between having two internet sources at the two rural sites that we have at opposite ends of the state pretty much, that we could probably pull this off back to the studio. And there are a lot of devices that had been mentioned, and we just noticed, hey, we've got a surplus of these BRIClink IIs, and they are capable, we take for granted, they are fully capable of taking in two separate internet providers for redundancy. I've known this for years. I've never tried it. And we're like, okay, well, we've got a surplus of this equipment, plus we might have to buy one more, but why don't we give it a try? And I just thought, the NPR affiliate stations, which we are, they have jumped on board with using a Comrex amongst other devices. Hey, let's make that redundant as well. Let's put a second internet source on the BRIClink II for, interlinking with other NPR facilities. So here we are today, and I'm like, great, we got the equipment, we've got two internet sources. How do we make this work? And I'm going to share the screen right now and begin that and show you some of our pages, because I believe a lot of you are very familiar with the BRIClink II. And let me get all situated here. And so this may look familiar to many of you. Oops, let me just maneuver here. This here is our main studio, and this is where I'm going to lean on Chris some. This probably looks familiar, like I said. Under performance, well, let's see. Should I go back to connections? No. under performance, there are a number of separate screens. And let me minimize a few other bars here. Everyone can see okay, right? I'm
Yes,
not
sir.
seeing you now. Good. Speak up there if there are any problems. I'm at the Virginia Association of Broadcasters convention in Virginia Beach, and this is how I got started today. They told me midstream, just as we started today, that I do have Wi-Fi, so if I need to switch to that, no problem, just let me know. But I'm going to show you all of these statuses that you have with the BRIClink, and Chris is going to help me explain how they work. And also, if you would, Chris, you can also jump in and explain how we even interface, and I'll begin that. But good, we've got everything set up here. The first thing, real quick, just so you have a basic idea, all Comrex interfaces with the later software. You can follow this same method here, the same flow. There's a network manager. Up until 3 months ago, I only had one device connected, and I didn't even bother to look at this network manager except for putting in my static IP address. Well, once I plugged in a little dongle, I wish I had one to share with, to show you, through a USB interface on the back of your BRIClink II. Once you plug in an approved or recommended, best way to put it, dongle, all of a sudden you can see a second network device, and you can program it as such. I put in another static IP. So I just want to clear that up real quick. Any questions so far?
Let me jump in real quick, Mike.
Please.
Early on, we were really reluctant to put any kind of a network manager in the actual web interface itself, just out of fear that somebody would get in there, they could fiddle around with the IP settings and prevent your ability to be able to actually use the device. But customers really required that they have that ability to adjust the network interface. So we put that in there. There are other ways you can get in there. You can actually type in the IP address, and you'll notice in Mike's bar right there at the top, it shows 10.88.1.176/. If you were to type, instead of hashtag performance, just type in CFG, that will actually take you to what's called the toolbox interface. So you could actually log in, just get rid of that, get rid of the hashtag if you would, Mike.
Sure.
And that takes you to a non-graphical interface. So you could actually get in, and if you go to network admin crosslock, you can adjust your settings there. So that's one way. The other way is you can use our Comrex device manager, which is a free download. So there are multiple ways you can get in and adjust the network settings.
Great. This has been the most helpful, because when you're tweaking like we had done so often, it was just helpful to go right to, the GUI interface. And by the way, before I forget, when you're experimenting here, of course, you're going to want to check in on, okay, how are we doing now? Did we have any dropouts overnight? You can't listen all the time. There is also an address similar to, a little longer, but similar to what Chris was describing. You can actually download a log file. Chris, do you happen to know how long that log file is maintained?
I think until you disconnect and reconnect, it can be fairly sizable.
Wow. Okay. Because I've only seen it span over a period of days. So when you say disconnect, if we had a failure and we just weren't aware of it, that it's going to begin to log again. Got it.
Yeah, there might be a timeout setting on the log file, but I just don't know off the top of my head.
I'm going to spare everyone today of seeing that file, but just everyone know that there is a way to look at a log for if you have any questions that have come up, like, hey, there was a disconnect, or there wasn't audio, or a listener complained. There is a file you can go to, a log, to check out. So keep that in mind.
How do you get to the log?
Chris, did you happen to memorize it? I'll go ahead and show everyone right now.
I'd have to search for it. Give me a minute. I'll see if I can root around and find it.
Sure.
It's been a while since I've been to the tattoo parlor, and I haven't had them put that one on yet.
Yeah, understood. I'm going to type to have that in. It is worth seeing. And I have it somewhere myself, but that's one thing where today I didn't prepare with that. It might actually be here. You just gave me the config, not on this computer. Shoot, normally it is. Let me try one more address. Here it is. It is right here. Got it, Chris. So it's
cool.
So you guys can see it's question mark command equals get event log. And so right here, really, this has been a lifesaver. You can scroll down to see any activity, whether there's been a connect or a disconnect. Disconnecting, you see right here. And when you have this redundancy where you have two separate internet sources, as you're going to learn today, you don't know that there was a problem with your data, that there had been some lost packets or whatever. And I think this even gets down granular to a certain extent, telling you about packet loss. Don't quote me on that. And also, I don't know if Chris is familiar with this, but we see a lot of incoming. So this kind of takes me back to where we had some learning curve here where we had to make sure we didn't have any SIP connections allowed. You know, there's some normal tweaks that you should probably be doing anyway. But if there is a SIP connecting and it disconnected and you never knew about it, you might find it here in the log. So there you have it.
That's another reason we recommend that people update their firmware as often as possible, because we're usually adding whitelist and blacklist applications to that, so that SIP devices and SIP bots aren't able to log on to your device if they're known.
Yeah. But I wish I knew about that log a long time ago. There have been questions prior to learning as much as we have today that I could have that would have come in handy. And it is in the manual. You just got to know to look for it.
That log also spits out to a program we have called Fleet Commander, and it can send you an alarm based on certain parameters. So that's another fun little thing.
What? I'm writing that down right now.
Fleet Commander.
Okay. Cool. And so we could get alarms if there's an issue, and maybe we specify, how does that work?
Basically, you specify what you want it to alarm you on, and that'll send it to your Windows PC. And then from there, you can have it send you an email or something like that.
That is super cool. Thank you.
So is this showing us data loss right now?
Yeah, well, let me explain. So right now I've got 3 sites. This .88 is the home base, and it's just a server to 2 other sites that we have. So the 2 other sites are not sending audio back, so you see nothing but data loss. Make sense?
And that shows receive. So it's actually showing that there is 100% packet loss on the receive, because the encoder on the far side is not sending anything to the device we're looking at right now.
Yep. And conversely, here's another one of our sites. And let's see, you see that we're receiving all of our packets, very low latency and jitter, if I'm saying that correctly. Well, yeah, I am, delay and jitter. And it's a beautiful world. When you have blue skies like this, I'm always a happy camper. And I think all of you who are familiar with BRIClink II are familiar with this concept here.
And Mike, I'm guessing you have maybe a 700 millisecond a minimum delay on there?
Yeah, so we inserted some latency there, some delay cushion, however the proper term is, just to make sure we got through any bumps with the 2 carriers. So yes, sir.
And that's why you have such low jitter.
Exactly.
A very abstract measurement and term, but it's basically the difference between time of arriving packets. It's like a really obscure measurement term, and that's why you see the light blue is very, very low. That's the jitter measurement. Delay is the darker blue.
And so correct me if I'm wrong, you know, when we add that extra cushion there, you go down here, and we have seen this in the past where there had been some corrections that were made because, again, this link is not in real time. We've got that luxury. It's an STL link. And that is the magic of the data loss correction. Correct, Chris?
Yeah, there's really no data loss that's happening, but it seems like every once in a while, it's just making a little bit of a correction. Maybe because of some response to some strange jitter reading.
Yeah. And so we had our moments. Hey, my story, and this is a neat one to share. If any of you have a secure network going through something like a Cisco router, one of the learning curves for us had been, oh, we're like, this is great. We've got the one Cisco router. We've got 2 services going through the router, and we have them coming out of specific ports on the router or the switch. Let's just plug them in, and there's our redundancy. It's all set up. So we had this false sense of security. And we just had a little learning curve in dealing with our equipment that I started to see here on this data loss and correction. I thought nothing of it. There were periods where it was quite consistent, where we'd see some correction taking place, recovering packets. And later down the road, we started to actually go silent at these locations. And I'm like, what gives? And as it turns out, since we were going through the same switch and router using the same exact gateway, well, it confused the equipment. So we were having these disconnects. The quick solution to that was we ended up setting up some additional switching equipment, and we're going direct, not through our secured switch. It's still another secured switch, but we went through another source to have just 2 separate gateways, just to clarify in case anyone were to bump into that issue. Scrolling down, you want to say anything about the codec channel, Chris? There's really nothing to see or say.
Yeah, there's 2 channels to consider. One is crosslock and one is the codec channel. And the codec channel just shows the receive rate and the transmit rate. But
yeah,
if you're using multiple data, are you using crosslock on this connection?
Yes, we are, which you'll see below.
That's a little bit more interesting. So if you open that one up.
Yep, I just need to scroll down. Yeah, right here.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty. So there's actually 4 different networks there, which is kind of crazy. And that basically represents, you must have 2 networks on each end. Is that correct?
Yeah, so let me scroll down a little further. At every site, everyone will see, you will see that at every one of our sites, we have a main, well, we have 2 internet sources, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom of each of your devices, and you'll see specifically which network, which service they are. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, what am I talking about? I was just responding to
yeah, okay.
Someone's text here.
So, okay. So anyway, when you look at this utilization transmit, that's a beautiful thing. When you see a rainbow of colors, you know you're in good shape. I don't know if Chris can give examples because we've had rock solid service, but if any one of these colors ends up disappearing or looking a little lower, there might be some issue, or you might be missing a connection. And that's where we're going to put this fleet commander to work, because I want to know when a link goes down. We were already working on another way of making that happen, but it'll be nice to have both. You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, there's always an ebb and flow in the amount of data that is available on a network, because you could be that data could be being utilized by another device on your network, or just somewhere along the line data gets rerouted. And so you'll see a constant ebb and flow in those colors. This is in a bonding mode, and it's actually showing 2 networks on each end in one graph. And the reason that it's showing it all on one graph is because we're in a multi-streaming mode.
We should explain that to everyone, the multi-streaming mode. We need to explain that to everyone because it's not so straightforward.
Okay.
The multi-streaming mode, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, so normally if you were connecting one codec to another codec, you'd be basically doing two-way audio, one device to one device. But in this case, Mike is actually connecting from one device, transmitting, he's got audio going into it. That audio is being transmitted to three different locations.
Two different locations.
Two different locations. So by creating a transmit-only profile and a new connection and assigning a transmit-only profile to that connection, it's actually streaming multiple instances of the encoder. And that's why we're seeing all the data connections in this one graph for transmit only. You're not seeing any receive because he's only transmitting from the head end to the two transmitter locations.
Yep. So that's key for us because we could, Chris, have you ever heard of the maximum number of connections you would have? And I know it's dependent on the algorithm you're using, but we're just using two going back to our studios, same programming going to two different sites. Do you know of users going even higher than that? I'm sure there are.
Yeah, well, it gets a little bit complicated because if you go back to the earliest BRIClink, that one had a much lower powered processor where you could basically, if you were using like AAC, HEAAC at 96 kilobits, you could do 3 different devices easily. Beyond that, you might run out of processor headroom. When you get into BRIClink II and the more recent BRIClink II, you can pop that up to 10 easily, but I know people who have gone much higher than that, especially if you use a lower bitrate algorithm. The thing to remember is every time you create a new connection and add that TX only profile, you're creating a new instance of the encoder and you're chewing up that much upload bandwidth on your network. So you need to make sure you have enough bandwidth to accommodate all of those instances of the encoder. Of course, the way to go around that is if you had like an MPLS network or a IGMP capable network, you can do IP multicast and just have one sending out one stream, and then it would go to all your IGMP routers and brick links, and you could do a gajillion at that point.
Wow, that is slick. So there have been 2 questions so far before we get much further. We're using an AAC type format last I recall, Ken, but there have been a point where we called, and here's my praise for Comrex. They have been with us every step of the way. This wasn't easy to configure for our specific situation. It was a breeze to get started, but we had our own little hiccup. I don't know if Chris wanted to step in. I think I heard him speak. Or maybe not.
Oh, not me.
Okay. So we had our own little personal hiccups, but Comrex, as usual, they were there to help us as usual and got us through this. They made some changes maybe with the algorithm, but last I recall, it was an AAC of some sort streaming from the studio. And then David asks, when we're talking about putting a USB NIC as a backup, oh yeah, he was just talking about how great it works. And here's another great example of that. And yeah, I'm telling you, the key thing to understand here, we're in a rural area. So that means there are 4 different services. And thinking that through, remember I told you we have an RF link going across from the sheriff's office, which by the way, is going through trees, which we did a site survey, but got misinformation, unfortunately. It's still working. We've got 2 of the 4 services work reliably almost all the time. The other 2 services, they're not all that great. So without having a second source and having a device like this, we couldn't have pulled it off at all. So yeah, having that backup NIC access is everything. We wouldn't have done this otherwise. Any questions so far other than that, even for Chris?
I'll just mention that our very first BRIClink did not have that USB connector on it. It only had an Ethernet, an RJ45 connector. With the addition of that USB port, you're able to use what Mike is doing, and that's a USB to Ethernet adapter, and it turns that USB into a second NIC. So you could run just a regular wired connector, or you could hook it up to a Max Connect, PepLink router, or even a Cradlepoint router. You can also use
to like a Ubiquiti as well.
You could. I've actually, I've got a bunch of Ubiquiti stuff over there in a box that I've used for a number of different applications, mostly for video, but for the audio stuff, the Ubiquiti stuff is great. So as long as you can, well, you could either go directly into that Ethernet jack on the back of the BRIClink, or use it. I can tell you this, I've been able to use a Ubiquiti link and a broadband Ethernet link together and get them to fail over between the two. Ubiquiti tends to be a little bit faster than the internet link.
Yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
Yeah. And
you can also do some, you can also do some things like creating a static NAT route if you need to, which is necessary if you're using a private LAN and a public internet connection. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do in this box and our other boxes that it's kind of buried in there, but we do have a lot of white papers on that stuff, and our support guys are always willing to walk you through that.
Yeah, my example here, this is the other studio facility, but it is using a Ubiquiti device. It's connected to a local fiber service coming from the sheriff's office. And like I said, even with the poor signal, it says needs improvement. They aren't kidding. It's really poor. If you're familiar with the signal, anything above, they call it 50%, is fine for the most part. I was right at 50%, and we knew that was going to be an issue. It dipped down, I guess, because of the trees and the growth of the leaves over the past 4 weeks. We're still rock solid, knock on wood. So yeah, it just works. I was going to bring up another point. So my example that I've shown you today, it will not always apply to your needs. So for example, and maybe Chris can explain the differences here. When I first configured and had this working with my two connections, my two internet sources at each site, this receive rate was, I think, double. It was 124 dot whatever. So my configuration may not be the same as yours. That's the only point I want to bring up. And I think you understand through Chris, there's so many ways you can make this work. It's pretty cool. Anything to add to that, Chris?
Well, the receive rate you're seeing is the encoded audio plus overhead. So the kilobits per second really is indicating that. The funky thing you see over there on the transmit rate,
yes,
is because you're not transmitting, you're actually just, you're not transmitting from that one.
Yeah.
You're just receiving there, but there is a little bit of status information that's blowing back.
Okay. So I don't have much more to add. How about you, Chris? Is there anything I've missed?
Well, I think what I'd like to do, if you'll indulge me, and I'm not going to get marketing or salesy because that's just wrong. I'd like to kind of clarify what our different applications that we offer are. You know, a lot of people ask about crosslock and switchboard. What's the difference between the two and what's their purpose? But I'll throw up a little deck real quick and just kind of go through that and kind of explain what each does and what they are, and stuff. All right, hang on 1 second. Let me go ahead and share a thing here. Share. All righty.
Got it.
And Mike, can you see that?
Yep.
All right, let me just go back up here. Okay. So the first thing that I'll talk about is switchboard. And switchboard, if you have an access product like Access to USB or the Access Classic, Access Rack, Access NX Rack, Access NX Portable, any of those devices, and even our video product, which is called Live Shot, they all come with switchboard licensed, and it's a traverseless server. And the whole purpose of switchboard is to help the devices find each other across the public internet, which can be a real challenge, especially if you are on a remote, you don't have an IT professional that travels with you, or you can't get the cooperation of the person at the site. Let's say you're at a car dealership. They're not going to open up a port for you. 9 times out of 10, we'd like to think that Switchboard can help you through that. Maybe it's 8 times out of 10. The other place where it helps is if you don't have a static IP address, at least on one end. And I kind of tell people that Switchboard is like Facebook Messenger for your audio codecs. So what happens is, once the devices are connected to the internet, they'll talk to our server, which is out in the cloud, and they'll say, hey, here I am. Here's my public IP address. And by the way, here's my private IP address. Here's my local LAN address. And I'm going to punch a hole through my NAT out to the switchboard so you can get back to me if you're in my group, if I give you permission to do so, or if I've shared my codec with you so you can do that. And that's essentially what Switchboard does. You'll notice this is just a little screenshot of an access codec. And you'll notice some little green icons next to Johnny Rico and UCF headquarters. That's basically the little icon that means that that device is connected to Switchboard and I can connect to it because it's in my group. So in that way, I just select it and connect it without having to do anything else. I don't have to type in the IP address or anything like that. And you'll also notice that on the lower right-hand corner of that screen, there's a little window that says Switchboard. It shows me that it's online. It shows me the public IP address. Oops, sorry about that. It shows me, let's see if I can get back there. And just below that, it'll tell me the type of NAT that it's encountering. One of the things that network address translation doesn't like is having two symmetric NATs opposing one another. And when you have that condition, the packets cannot traverse. It's a really strange, complicated. You IT guys know the reason for this, but essentially the packets just bounce within the NAT and they can't get out. The way to resolve that is to port forward. But in the cases where you can't port forward, 8 times out of 10, Switchboard should help to get around that. So that's Switchboard. The other thing
can I speak to that, by the way?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
So I think it's worth, Switchboard is a service you sign up for. There's, correct me if I'm wrong, unless I'm getting confused, there's a fee for it.
You're
right,
wrong.
Chris?
You're wrong.
Okay, I got it backwards. Then when we get to that point, I'll justify that one. But this is really a savior right here too.
So Switchboard is, it's a free service that we offer. If you have the access line of products or our video stuff, it's included in the price. There's a one-time license unlock for BRIClinks, mainly because we never priced that into it because we just didn't think that that was going to be something that people would utilize with the BRIClink. Because most of the time people were using them for a studio to transmitter, studio to studio link. So just the one-time unlock for $100, and then you can use it for infinity and beyond.
Thanks.
Okay, so on to Crosslock. Let's talk about Crosslock. Well, Crosslock is essentially the Comrex reliability layer. It's kind of the secret sauce that makes our stuff so reliable. Early on, we had our BRIC channel, I guess you'd call it, our Broadcast Reliable Internet Codec channel. And there were some tools in there that you could use. But we took all of the great things that we had developed up until, I'd say, 2018, 2017. And we developed this thing called Crosslock VPN for our video product. Subsequently, we ported it back to our audio product. And it's a virtual private network that lives within the internet. So within that Crosslock layer, all the magic happens. And there are many things that are going on in there. Now, Switchboard and Crosslock work together in many cases. Probably the most important way is if you have devices that are connected to Switchboard, they keep status information between all the codecs. And if all the codecs have the version of firmware, which is 4.0 or higher, on them, they will automatically make a cross-lock connection between the devices. Otherwise, you have to manually do some settings on each of the device on either side so that each device knows their individual media access control address or MAC address. Then it'll do a cross-lock connection. But Switchboard makes it automatic. Switchboard also does the little neat trick of keeping the devices connected and making sure that they maintain status information in between them. So they work together. So cross-lock reliability layer, Switchboard is just that. It's the switchboard. So when you make a call to another codec, it will automatically find it over the public internet and connect without having to do much more than hit that little button. So within that VPN tunnel, there's all of this stuff that's happening. You've got all the status information going back and forth. It's monitoring all of the connected networks that are attached. It's also managing the media stream and basically applying all of the necessary things to make sure that that data gets through reliably. And it's applying things like automatic repeat request or ARQ. It's applying FEC, forward error correction if necessary. It's also doing some special error concealment techniques. Basically, we do some little trickery so you don't get the duck fart sounds if you get some packet loss. It's a really subtle algorithm that makes that happen. And it's all managed by this advanced adaptive management engine that our nerds up in Massachusetts have developed. And it really is pretty amazing because it's doing all this stuff internally. One other thing to note is that that within that VPN, all of the devices that are connected and all of the networks that are connected are assigned an IPv6 address. And that little IPv6 network within the VPN lives inside the internet layer. So that's another little interesting tidbit. So we talked about multiple networks. This will work either on the portable side where you have two networks, maybe you're using Wi-Fi and Ethernet or a 4G and Ethernet. Maybe you're using all three. You're using a Wi-Fi, a 4G LTE, and Ethernet. All three of those networks will basically bond together to create a much more robust network. And as Crosslock is monitoring each of those data networks, it's sending the appropriate amount of data down each channel based on how much available bandwidth there is, how much predictive loss there is on that network. And it's sending it back to the rack mount on the other side. But wait, there's more. What if I have multiple networks on both sides? Well, it'll manage those as well. So I could have 2 or 3 networks on the rack mount side. I could have 2 or 3 networks on the portable side. All of those media streams, all of those networks, all of those data connections are being managed by that really sophisticated adaptive management engine within the Crosslock VPN. It's all exciting stuff. It's very boring, but it's exciting. Okay, so I will tell you just real quick, there is a free app that we have on our website. We've had it for a number of years. It's called Codec Commander. It's a Windows-based app. You can throw it on your favorite Windows PC as long as you don't mind your Windows computer updating and rebooting itself every once in a while. And it basically gives you everything you need so you can look at your device remotely. If you want to look at more devices, you can use Fleet Commander, which I was telling you about earlier, Mike. That gives you the ability to put more than 100 access or BRIClink on, and you can monitor them. You'll notice within the screen, there are little tile views. You can click on one of those tiles to control that device, and you have access to all of its internal settings. It's great, especially if you have a network operations center and you have multiple of these. You can have them set up so that they're all on a big 80-inch plasma on the wall, and you can kind of make sure that they're all connected. It also gives you the ability to do alarms and some logging information, and also some scheduling. So you can schedule when you want devices to connect or disconnect. So that's kind of fun. And then the other app that a lot of you, if you have our products you've used before, it's called Device Manager. It's basically the way that you can update your devices. and change the network configuration and so forth. So those are the little things I wanted to show you. And now back to Mike.
All right, well, thank you. Hey, that is pretty neat. So I was never familiar with Codec Commander, right? Did I get that correct? Because I didn't
did.
write it down. Yeah, Fleet Commander I was familiar with, and now you've got me to thinking that, yeah, that might be a worthwhile investment given the assets we have out there in the field. So thanks for sharing that. And I can't say enough about Switchboard and Crosslock together. They made that job I showed you with linking all the sites that much easier. Like maybe one site, no problem at all connecting. The other site, I'm pulling my hair out. But once I had Crosslock, I already had Switchboard integrated. They just found one another. Can't say enough about it. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm done.
So Chris, what's the device manager, Codec Commander, Crosslock? Where does one start?
Well, Crosslock is actually in the device itself. That's, like I said, the reliability layer. So if you want to use that, crack open the manual, and the manual will describe how that's done. As I mentioned, Switchboard, if you have one of the Access products or our LiveShout product, you just have to call us. We'll set you up an account, and it's an easy peasy thing. And again, that's free. The only thing that costs is if you have a BRIClink unit, you just have to get a license unlock for it, $100. And then again, call us up. We set you up with a Switchboard account, and you're good to go. Codec Commander, Fleet Commander, you can download, and Device Manager, you can download those from our website. Device Manager is one of those really important tools that you just have to kind of have. But Codec Commander and Fleet Commander, you can download that, put that on a Windows PC and give that a try. Codec Commander manages one codec, Fleet Commander more than 100, and we charge a little bit for that, but it's not ridiculous. And I know somebody who has, who could probably get you a deal.
All right. Anyone else have a question or two for these gentlemen? Just press your space bar or alternate A to unlock your mic.
Yeah,
Oh.
I do. Stu Engelke. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, Stu.
Yep.
Okay. I used to work for Salem a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we were using BRIClinks for studio transmitter links and remotes, and I loved Crosslock. Everything about it was working great. We did use I brought out an AT&T and a Verizon wireless modem in case I didn't have a plug-in, and between the two of them and Crosslock, it would always get through. But anyway, for the studio transmitter links, we were using Crosslock with a local MPLS circuit and a local, internet provider. And then they came along and decided to do it all themselves and they used a I guess it was it was kind of like a wireless modem, a Verizon wireless modem, a local internet provider, and an MPLS, but they combined them all in their Cisco router, and we didn't use Crosslock at all. And I don't know how they were doing that, because when you pulled one out, it was supposed to switch out to the other one automatically, but it wasn't nearly as good as Crosslock. And I don't know if they're still doing that, if you work with them at all.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with them doing that, but I mean, we created Crosslock to make sure that it would work well, even in worst case scenario. In fact,
And it does.
Yeah, well, there's one thing that we did, which was a little add-on. You can't use BRIClink with a 4G LTE modem as your transmission source unless you use it in backup mode, and it's something we call hot swap. So let's say you've got your primary wired connection on the Ethernet. You get a Comrex Connect modem, plug it into the back of a BRIClink, and in the event it starts to predict packet loss, that adaptive management engine starts to predict packet loss, it will automatically fail over to the 4G LTE modem, send a contact closure to the far end, so it can send an email or a light or something to let you know that it's on 4G LTE mode. And as long as you've got a good 4G LTE connection out at the transmitter site, it's a great way to keep you on the air, especially if you're limited in terms of what you're able to get out there at the transmitter site. So hot swap is just another one of those tools that we put in the toolbox for you.
Yeah, I know Crosslock worked extremely well, and I liked it better than what the other choice was, but I used what they told me to. So
Yeah, Crosslock, like I mentioned, was something that we developed for our live shot video product, and it's kind of a big disparity in terms of the amount of data that it uses. So for video, I mean, you're looking at a sweet spot of 6 to 8 megabits per second, as opposed to 96 or 128 kilobits per second. But we needed something that would basically fortify that transmission so you wouldn't get the macro blocking that you get with video images like you see in some stuff. And our guys actually perfected Crosslock on the Boston Marathon course, because we had one of our video devices on a motorcycle, and it was going through a really spotty area of data coverage. And one of our guys had a eureka moment. He goes, "That's it. I figured it out. I can't get it any better than that." And it is. It's a pretty solid performer in terms of what he was able to create, and the settings, and making it, the predictive analysis of packet loss is really kind of the key to it all, and the windowing of it, and that's kind of the magic. And I kind of tell people that to apply that to audio, like we've done on the audio product side, it's kind of like using a bazooka instead of a fly swatter, but it's a really good bazooka to have on you.
anyway, appreciate Crosslock. I loved it. It worked great. Saved my butt a bunch of times.
Right on.
So,
Well, I know that you have to go, Mike. You have a meeting, you said, at about 3 o'clock your time.
Yeah, I can leave whenever, but yeah, I was gonna, when you guys just got into the chit chat, I was gonna probably taper off.
Okay. Chris, you also, last time you were with us, started to introduce the gaggle. And I thought maybe that would be something you might want to spend a minute tossing out to us.
I'll spend 58 seconds and not a second more. Gaggle is just a, those of you who are familiar with our Opal IP audio gateway know that it uses a web browser on the remote side. And it's a box that requires some specific IT requirements, like it has to have a static IP address. You have to be able to forward the CNAME record to the IP address, and a bunch of ports have to be available. For a lot of enterprise oriented organizations, not as easy to do because of network security. And for smaller organizations, it's really difficult to do because it just gets beyond the skill set of a lot of IT people at these places. So we created something that will allow you to use something very similar. It's called Gaggle. It's a web browser-based communications tool. Up to 5 people can log into the web browser interface, and the moderator can then connect Gaggle to a BRIClink or an access back in the studio. And it's just using UDP port 5060 to connect back to the studio. So if you can make a SIP connection to a BRIClink or an access, you can use Gaggle to have conferenced audio between 5 listeners using the Opus coding algorithm to connect back to an access or a BRIClink. $35 a month is the intended target price, or $350 for the year with a code from your favorite broadcast supplier. It's a great way to turn your access or BRIClink into a really nice remote contribution tool. for like sports score roundups on a Friday night, or political election coverage or anything else like that, where you need to get guests in, and you don't want them to sound like they're calling in on a crappy cell phone, which to me is nails on a chalkboard. I don't know what it is to you guys, but I can't stand listening to, well, there's only one thing worse than hearing a caller on the air on a cell phone, and that's hearing a listener calling in on a cell phone, but on the air. That's me.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. I'm
Sorry if I went over.
No, not at all. I'm going to have to try some of these little tricks that you gave and see if I can connect up to this Native American station and their BRIClink. So far, it hasn't happened, but we'll give it a shot.
Well, I will tell you that, I mean, if you have a BRIClink or an Access or any of our products, or you have any questions, we've got a really good support team. They're available 9 to 5 Eastern time. You can always call them 800-237-1776. You can always get a hold of me too. Even if you don't have a Comrex product, but you have questions about a setup, I'm happy to provide some feedback from my experience dealing with all this stuff. You can just shoot me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to help.
So just to be clear from our earlier conversation, switchboard is not necessary for a facility that has only 1 or 2 pairs of BRIClinks. They really don't need to have switchboard.
No, it's not necessary. I mean, it was really helpful if you don't have a static IP address on one side at least. But if you're just got a remote site and you're connecting into a device that has a static IP address that doesn't change, you're good to go without it. It's a nice tool, not a necessary tool.
Yep, looks good.
Crosslock is not a necessary tool, but it's a great tool to have, especially if you're dealing with a slightly marginal network that we have some kind of like unpredictable packet loss.
Well, that's something very interesting, and perhaps maybe you and I can talk later, or one of your tech support guys, in interpreting some more of these displays and what someone may want to do in terms of a maintenance log, checking the throughput, for instance, on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Well, we had over 50 people logged in while you were talking. We'll get a video up probably tomorrow, and invite you back again to talk to us some more.
Hey, my pleasure. Any old time.